Welcome back to Wargaming World
and to a how to play video of the new and very exciting BOHICA rules. So before we get started, I'd like to just acknowledge and thank Paul Eaglestone for giving us the thumbs up to do this review, this how-to video.
Before we start, I want to mention three Facebook groups to be part of this discussion. One is BOHICA itself, so there's already a lot of discussion about these rules, and it's a really great group. There's also Vietnam War Wargaming, which I run myself, along with Wargaming World itself. And finally, if you're not already a subscriber to this YouTube channel, this is your moment just to click the subscribe, and on we go. Now, the approach I'm going to take is similar to the way I've done it for other games, other how-to videos, and I'm going to try and go through the rulebook somewhat page by page, so you get it in the right order, and then I'll try and play a very simple game across this table, and try and use the more simple elements of the rules, and perhaps just do an infantry exercise. I might then follow with a second and third video with more extensive games using helicopters, vehicles, etc. But let's start by having a look at the first thing, which is the key elements that we need in terms of dice, etc. Now, you might wonder why I start with dice, but it's because it's this. It's going to be a D20. That's your printable dice played through the game. Importantly, and one of the good features straight away for the rule set, is looking at the difference between the forces themselves and looking at what's referred to as skills and drills. What do I mean by skills and drills? Well, it's the difference between our civilians here, so where the scale is between 1 and 5. Civilians would be a 1. We've got our Americans getting off the Huey there, and they may well be anything between 3, 4 and 5, 5 being the highest in terms of their skills and drills. Now, the skills and drills might be for individuals, might be for a section, or all the way up to a platoon. Wouldn't recommend. Okay, let's take a closer look, and this is exactly as it is in the rules, in the rulebook on page 9. If we were taking a look, for example, at the whole of the section, then on the left hand side we have the NVA, and with this group of 10 or 11 men, we would look perhaps at 3 for the skills and drills across them, and for the Americans, for the troops here, for the 14 troops here, we would look as a whole, we might look at 4. However, we've gone further down, and so for the leaders of the 2 sections, we've got 5 for each of those, and then for the fire teams, we split them out a little further. So for the Americans, you can see we've got 2 with skills and drills at 4, 1 at 3, and then we've got a variety across the NVA, 2, 3 and 4. Okay, so we've identified what a squad of the NVA and the Americans might look like, and then the rules begin to look in a little bit more detail about the men themselves. Remember, we could do things on an individual basis, and so we look not only at our skills and drills, but in terms of the actual weapons they have. So it could be the primary and secondary weapon, also things like the armour that they've got, whether they've got a flak jacket or not, and other elements such as grenades. So I won't go into a great deal of detail here, other than you'll know what you've got on the figures themselves, and again, the rules are very flexible in terms of how you might want to use that. Also talks about who you'll identify as your NCO as well, looking at the officer there about how they then make impact a little later in these rules with regards to areas such as suppression. Finally, and not surprisingly again, we also have areas of command. So the chain of command again relates to these figures in terms of the number of inches we're looking at, about how far units can be away from each other in order to still be in contact and in command. It'll be no surprise that the vehicles also work in exactly the same way as our infantry. So primary, secondary and tertiary weapons. We'll have a crew, we'll have skills and drills, and principally it'll be the same format as how they operate. And again, as I go through the video, we'll see with some examples. There is a whole list here of all sorts of different vehicles, and gives good detail and good options there for both forces. So the way the rules work is an emphasis on a scenario, keeping things relatively simple. So it might well be that we've got either the Americans or NVA checking out these buildings, or alternatively we might have a Huey landing and looking through a particular jungle area. All sorts of different ways we want to look at it, but the emphasis here is to try and suggest to you that you think about the options where either force can be successful. You might set out perhaps attackers with twice as many troops as the other, but there's a number of ways you can add a little bit of variety. One of the options for variety is the different terrain you might have. So here, for example, we've got a very open area, and that might be advantageous for defending forces, or alternatively we might look in the background here where we've got a lot of jungle, or again buildings here, and indeed here in front of us we've got a river. So you can have all sorts of different types, depends what you've got, and indeed the rules begin to look at certain areas where you may have certain value to certain areas. So for example, you might put a hill in a particular place for you, if only because that sets you up for your defensive position. There's all sorts of different ways, but again, just to emphasize, the good thing about these rules is to give you a lot of flexibility to set the scenario that you think is most appropriate. One of the things I particularly like in the rule set is the fact that the civilians also play a part. So the idea is that they're respected by both parties, and there is a possibility where they can get involved in the game, in particular with what we have in terms of random events. Now again, the idea within the set is that you can set your own random events based on however you want to set it up. It's also really useful if you're going to play this solo as well. So you could actually be you could be the NVA or the Viet Cong, or whichever force you wanted to have, and set the random events in relation to that force. But there is an example for you. So on the D20 you'll be rolling for different events that take place during a turn, and as you can work through, you'll have the rule set yourself, so you can see how it might best fit for your scenario. But it's another really good feature of the variety that this game offers. And finally, before I go into a sample game, also make other reference to the terrain. So I've already said that you can set this out in whichever way you want, whether you want to have it with regards to a scenario, but there is subsequent detail in terms of the penalties and how difficult it is to move in certain areas, difficult terrain, jungle, etc. So you can go through the rule sets as you wish, but I think it's a good one to pause on and try and move into what it would look like if we had a initial action. So let's set that up, and we'll work through a game and pause each time to focus on each individual element of the rules. So I've set up a scenario, and unfortunately you'll have seen that the Huey that was there, unfortunately, when it was trying to take off, took a direct hit, and we've got some real trouble. So we've had units coming in, so we've got a radio team trying to get extra support. We've got an M113 that's in the back there, giving us a bit of armour. But the units that I already identified, so if you remember, we had our NCO there with a 5, we had 2 4s and a 3, and now spread out into this group, and they're going to now try and investigate and see where all the shooting has come from. And hidden away back in this area of cover, we've got the NVA. So we've got the units that we identified. So we've got the 2, 3 and the 4, and we've also got the command officers there with a 5, and they're waiting for the Americans to advance, and in between times we've got the civilians. So where and how might they add a bit of random events within the game? So let's have a look stage by stage and go through the rules with this as our scenario. Okay, so let's start the game, and there are 3 things we need to look at each turn, and that is morale, random events, and initiative and actions. Now you'll see in the rulebook it talks about the fact that it's unlikely if in the very first turn of a game that we would need to take morale. Why would we? Quite obviously. However, so that we can have a look in the rules, I'm going to say that we need to. So the unit which is closest to the Huey that's gone down, I'm going to say we've seen casualties there, and we're going to have to take a morale test to see what they do. So for these 4, what we will be looking at is a morale test, and what we've got is 4 men where we start on 4 in terms of skills and drills, and because they've seen this Huey go down, we're going to need to go down the table to see whether we deduct or indeed add some factors to see what the number is, and then we'll roll a d20. So we're going to do a morale test with these 4 men. We start with 4 for their skills and drills, and they're in soft cover, so that's a +1, so we've got 5, and then each of them can see their mate round the corner, as it were, so that's another +3. You get 1 for each of those, so we're up to 8. You get a -2 because they've seen a casualty from the Huey here, so therefore we're starting on a 6, and then we roll. So what we do know is that even if we got a 1 from the d20, at the very worst they're going to be suppressed. So a result of 1 to 4 would mean that they withdraw. It's not going to be that. So 5 to 12 will be that they are suppressed for that particular turn, and 13 and above they'll be fine. So we're rolling for each man, so there's 4 men there, so the one nearest to the Huey, it's a high number, so he's fine. The one nearest to him, and we've got a 2 there, so that person's suppressed. 2 more men, another 2, so another is suppressed. Finally with a 12 we will add up to 18 in total, and so 2 are suppressed and 2 are fine. What does that mean for the game? It means the 2 men where I've just marked with a down dice, it means that they will only get 3 actions to do in this particular turn. They lose 1 action, and they also can't move, so they're prone, and they've got 3 actions for the rest of the turn. Our first roll, if you like, had a look at morale, and that'll obviously be more obvious in the subsequent turns. But let's have a look at the second element, and that is random events. Okay, so the next phase is that we have random events. Random events take place once a turn. There are occasional additions to that, but we do that as our second part of each turn. Now, on page 28 there is a long list of examples, but the idea here is that it's giving you all various different options, and later on in the book it talks about encouraging different types, but all the way through it suggests that you make your own. So I have done here, and I've set these options, these random events, based on this particular table. So there's all sorts of different things that could happen here, so I'm going to use an example in a second. But also you'll notice is that I've only filled in 10 of the 20 potentials, and what it means is that when I roll on the ones where it's a blank, nothing happens, and if something takes place on the other numbers, I cross it off, and so if that number comes up again, that'll just be nothing happening. So simple stuff here. So for the purpose of this, I'm going to roll on the ones I've put on here. So what do we get in terms of numbers? And we've got number 17. Right, 17 means there's a sniper. Okay, so any United States soldier who's out in the open, it takes an automatic hit. So let's work that out so we can see what happens from firing. So I'm going to pick out the second man there, the man in the middle. He's taken a hit. So if the man there in the middle has been hit, the one by the dice, we need to roll. He's got a flak jacket on, and we use this table here. So this is the infantry table. We've got the back injury table, I should say, for infantry. And what we've got is the sniper's rifle there. So again, we roll a d20. Now he's got a flak jacket, so we take 3 off this roll. The roll is 16, so it takes it down to 13. However, killed between 11 and 20, so therefore it's a man down. Now I'm just going to mark the fact that that man's down here. I'll take it off normally. But these 3 men are now affected as they've seen it, so we need to have an immediate morale test. So we're doing so because we've had a man who goes down close to them. So all 3 there, I'm going to roll them individually for each one. So we start with 3, that's the skills and drills level. The pluses are that each of them have 2 men close by within 6 inches where the men aren't suppressed or injured. So that goes to a plus of 5. But we lose 2 because we've seen man down. So therefore the starting figure that we're at is 3 plus all the rolls. So we're adding 3 to each of these rolls. Right, so the guy who's at the front, point man. Okay, so we get a 12 plus 3 is 15, he's fine. And in the middle, so this plus 3 makes 23, so he's absolutely fine. Finally, man at the back, and this plus 3. This is a 6 plus 3 is 9, which means he is suppressed. So across the whole group, it means that there are 2 men who are fine, and the one at the back there is suppressed. It means he doesn't move for the remainder of this turn, and he loses 1 of his 3 actions. He can still do things, but as I say, he's suppressed just for this turn. We've now looked at the start process of morale, and at the next stage with the random events. So the third is to look at initiative and actions. Now you can see here that we've got 4 dice, which is the 4 different units that we've been following all the way through. That's of the NVA, and we've got our Americans here, which have been impacted, taking their first casualty, and also the morale test that we've taken. And we now need to see about who operates next. And the first thing we need to test is the initiative. So we do so by taking individual units and putting them through essentially a contest with the next opposing unit. So what I mean by that is that if we take, for example, our unit over here, the one that's taken a casualty with its skills and drills of 3, I'm going to roll a dice against the initiative of the unit furthest away here. So it's this unit, this unit of 3 for the NVA, which has a skills and drills of 4. For initiative, all we're doing is we're comparing one unit to the other. So we have the Americans to start off with a 3, plus we add that. That's a 5, so we've got 8 in total. And the 20. So very simply, that the initiative, the first action is going to lie with this unit. I was almost caught out by this myself. This is the action. So the action points that you get if you have skills and drills of 4, you get 4 actions. But if you have 3 or 2, you still get 3 actions. And if you're Skills and drills is just the one. You have 2 actions. Now with the unit over here, if you remember, it had 4. So there are 4 actions that it can take. And we need to calculate what these actions are. So there's a whole mixture here on this table on page 31, but I'm going to try essentially to move forward. So for this unit of 3 men, I'm going to say we've got 4 actions. To run is 1 action. Now I'm going to say that we're going to try and dodge the very difficult ground, and so we're going to have it's the slightly difficult ground, and therefore we can move 4 inches at a time. I'm going to use 3 actions to go a total of 12 inches, and then with the other action I'm going to go prone. So when they're in position here, they'll be moving into whatever cover they can find, and that's where they finish. This time I'm going to try and move this unit, and again I'm going to try and move this American unit. So in terms of skills and drills, it's 3 each. Let's try the Americans first. That's a good number, I think that's 15. And it's 12 for the NVA, so it's the Americans this time. Now, unlike other war games, this unit here, the one that's going to move, what I haven't done is to remove the figure that's been killed, because we aren't looking at things just like a calculation of how many units can fire, etc. Instead, we want to make it as realistic as possible. And as a consequence, it means that what we're going to try and do with these units is that the 2 men who aren't prone are going to go and try and get their buddy and move him into some kind of cover. They may not know that he's been killed, but in terms of a realism, those are the actions that they're going to undertake. So let's calculate how many actions that uses and what happens next. So to walk you through the process, what actually happens is the 2 men who are in good shape, the first action they'll do is to talk. So talk to each other. They're going to go to the prone soldier to pick him up. So that's 1 action. The second is to move, so that's 2, and the third, when they get to him, is to drag him across into cover over 3 inches, and that'll be the 3 actions. And if you remember, we had the last man here who was prone, but he can still use his actions. So with the 2 actions remaining, he will go on Overwatch. Okay, so we've now had 1 action for both sides. So to speed up the process a little, I'm just going to mention what the other 3 units of the Americans and the NVA are intending to do. So we've got these units, we've got the leader of the section here on 5 and the unit behind them. So those 2 units are looking to move relatively slowly up along the side of this river and take up the cover they can get. And with the unit that's next to the Huey, they're going to try and set up some kind of cover. On this side, the NVA are looking to advance on the left hand side, and one of the units is to set up some cover in this dense area. So that's the intention. So I move so the advance of the NVA almost mirroring that of the Americans, but this time on the left hand side so that they can take these buildings. So for initiative, let's start with the unit with 5 there, which is the American leaders of the unit. So it's the NCO, and we're going to compare it with the unit there, which has 3. So the initiative is 5 to 3. Americans first of all. What have we got there? I think we've got a 9. So the Americans have got 14 in total, and they go first. Okay, just to show a bit of scale. Firstly, the unit has moved 9 inches. It's 3 actions. It's 3 inches is the move on here, and it's been moved across by the 2 men. 4th action is that the officer is talking to the man behind him, and to do the 5th action, which is to go prone. We're going to have this unit move again in a similar direction for the NCO up on the side of the river, and comparing with the same NVA. So it's 4 against 3. Americans first of all. That's a good number. So that's 17. That can't be beaten. This unit has 4 actions, it's used two to walk at 6 inches in total. Again, also talked, and they have also gone prone. Finally, this unit here, we've got two men who are prone, but it doesn't mean that the other two can't act. So again, this will be 4 against 3. Americans first of all. Low number, I think we've got 4 there. So we've got 8 in total. And the NVA certainly successful. So this unit has moved into the very dense jungle. It's going to get itself into a firing position, but at the moment it's used all of its actions to get into this position. Let's try again here. The Americans this time 4 against the NVA with 2. Americans, that can't be beaten, so they'll operate. So these two men go prone and are also on Overwatch. Now all the Americans have moved, but it doesn't mean that these two units don't, the 5 and the 2. They will move, it just means that they're moving at the end of that turn. The initiative had been driven by the Americans. Now this is where the NVA have moved to. Okay, so far we've had a look at a full turn and the setup of the game, so you'll see the figures are still where they were. However, because this is a how-to game, what I want to do is have a look at some additional things. One is that we haven't really seen any firing, so I want to see how we actually have firing, how that's worked out. Also want to look at some close combat if we can. Then also have a look at helicopters. What does that do? What about landing and then loading men? Then also about armour. And if I can, I'll throw in at the end a bit of Apocalypse Now. And ultimately, I want to finish by a review, by having a look at the game itself, making some comparisons to other games that I play, and giving it a review. Not really giving it a score as such, but some of the commentary about how I'll enjoy playing it, and perhaps how you might want to approach it, perhaps even from a solo perspective. So what we're going to take a look at is the Huey, and it has on the in terms of the helicopter itself, it has a 2+2 in terms of crew, so it gives an excuse for me to get the pilots out here. So 2+2, I am assuming, and I can be corrected here, is 2 for in terms of the pilots, and then 2 will be manning the side machine guns, and then it has 6 men that it can carry. So it's for me a fire team plus an NCO and a sergeant. So when we land here with the Huey, this is what we've got on the helicopter. So let's talk through how it lands, how it moves from high, medium, and low heights, and how it operates in terms of actions. Okay, I'm going to concentrate on the aircraft, but it's really around the helicopter example. But I'm going to make a couple of references, and the first is that all aircraft fly at high, medium and low levels. So it's an action moving between those levels, and I'll go into a bit more detail about landing, etc. Just to mention that when we're talking about planes, they're moving forward as well as changing their height, whereas helicopters can hover. If we go into a bit more detail down here, you'll see that there is a table telling you all sorts of different aircraft, and on the right hand side you've got the number of 6-inch movements. Okay, so that means how far you can move in each turn, so multiples of 6 inches. And so for this one we're talking about this Huey, so we've got 8 potential movements. So we actually enter the game here. You can imagine Obviously we're at a medium height. I've just got it there just to point out that we're at the edge of the board, entering here, and at medium height. So we then need to move it's 6 inches for each move, and we're moving 6 movements forward. Now that doesn't take any actions to do that. This is purely for movement. So therefore we're essentially moving 36 inches at medium height forward. That would get me here. So here we are, this is the medium height. So to move down to the lower height, we need to go down. It's going to cost 1 action for the crew, and it moves from medium to low, but we also need to move 6 inches further forward. So now we're at low height. And what we could do at low height is that we can fire. Perhaps we want to fire on potential enemy there. That might take 2 actions, 1 for spot and the second to fire, so we would have used 3 actions in total. And to fire, we've got 2 M60 machine guns firing from either side of this Huey. Now this is the spotting chart, so we're looking for the detail here. We add up all of the numbers, and then we need to get higher than that number in order to spot. And for the purposes here, I'm going to say we've got a +2 because we've moved, and a +8 because the target is in the jungle. So we need 11 or higher to spot. So we've got 2 machine guns, and with that a very modest 3, we don't see anything. And there with a 16, that's spotted. Now that we have a target, we are looking to hit. We start on 15. We need 15 or higher, and I would add that if you roll 20, it's always a hit. And then we're looking at some additions, some benefits. So first of all, your skills and drills. So in terms of the Huey crew, that's 5. So we've got 5 there. We are above the target, so that's another +1, so that's +6. And so we then have to look further down at any other factors. We're not aiming this, so the firer isn't an easy target. For example, instead, actually, targets in hard cover, so that's -4. So essentially, it's +2 to the roll, so we need a 13 to hit. And that is a 20. And our final area is the infantry injury table. So I'm firing, I'm going to say a medium machine gun, and so that gives a 4-inch spread. So what does that mean? A 4-inch spread means that we can hit those 2 men to see what the impact is. And with that, we roll and see what the impact will be. First we've got a 6, and that's a wound. Secondly, a 2, and that is suppressed. So what's the impact of the 2 men that were hit? So first of all, let's look at the suppressed man nearest to us. So suppression figure only has 1 action for that particular move that it's suppressed. It has 1 stress point permanently added and loses 1 action point for the rest of the game. The wounded man has 2 stress points permanently added and loses 2 actions for the rest of the game. And secondly, what we might want to do is that we want to lower and land. It means we've got to move another 6 inches further forward, and it takes 2 actions to land. So if we fire and then land, we've used all 5 actions. And this is where we finish. And the unit then moves out and into attack, depending on what we have for initiative. That's a movement for the Huey from the edge of the board across a total of 48 inches, landing and firing on the way. Now, I've added in a light machine gun and indeed a rocket launcher, so I'm going to see what would happen if this light machine gun took a shot at the Huey, what the impact would be, and what the potential damage. I'll save the rocket for one of the vehicles. Now, from spotting purposes, our NVA machine gunner, it's a -10 with a helicopter at low level, so I'm going to say we've been able to spot it at this distance. So as before in the shooting, we need a 15. So what modifiers do we get which would add on to our dice roll? Well, skills and drills will say that the unit has a skills and drills of 4. I'll just run this down a little bit. So what else have we got? So firing from above, well, no we aren't, but per aimed action. I will say that there's been an aimed action here, so that illustrates to you that if you're aiming you get a benefit, so that would take it up to 6. Target within 10 inches, no, not really, so still on a 6. And again, as we work further down, anti-tank weapon, hand control, attack helicopters, main weapon, no, that's not us obviously. Spotter under barrage, no we aren't. Now we might say that there might be some negatives here, so we're originally on 6. Firing from below the target would take us 5 as a plus. And again, as we go further down, looking at various things like target under cover, etc., and target in prepared defences, again, those are the things which will really make it harder to hit. So I'm going to say that there's 5 there. We normally need 15, so if we would reduce 5 from it, then we would need a 10. Let's take a roll, and that's a 12, so it's a hit. Now when we hit aircraft, it's actually on page 58 that we want this anti-aircraft kind of hit result. So this is where we roll. I'll just point out one thing, is that it says up here, all targets are destroyed on a natural 20. So if we roll a 20, we would do that. Although I'm looking at the light machine gun here on this particular table. On a 20 it says series, so I'll just need to qualify that point is, but we would need to roll and see what the impact is. Impact is an 18. So with a light machine gun, 18 is a medium, so let's take a look. Let's see what it would have been if it was serious. So let's just take up, if it was light, as you can see, +2 permanent stress points in terms of the crew. Medium, +2 permanent stress points, and aircraft aborts immediately. Action being taken this move and next. Serious would be a return to base and destroyed. Roll arrow die and D20 to see where the aircraft crashes. So we'd have a consequence there. So in this circumstance, we've taken a hit and the aircraft aborts immediately. In this circumstance, it means it's leaving this unit rather exposed. So what we're going to try and do now is I'm going to work out alongside this unit what hand-to-hand combat would be. Okay, this is the final part of the video I'm going to do, and I'm going to cover 2 things really, the hand-to-hand combat, and then also take a look at vehicles and firing at them as well as firing themselves. Now I've already covered initiative, and as we come round into this particular turn, remember we would have to roll and work out the initiative of who amongst these 2 units, so the Americans in front of us and then the NVA who are in the jungle there, if you can just see those figures, who would want to act first. Now the reality might be is that if you have the initiative, you might simply want to fire rather than charge into hand-to-hand combat. However, I just want to cover it purely so we can see that we can look at it about how the rules work in a really simple way, and then you'll know how to run it yourself. So I'm just going to set this up dead simple between 2 units. I'm going to assume that the Americans are attacking, and we'll see how that is then played out. So hand-to-hand combat is on page 51, and we have a fairly straightforward table. We need to work out between the figures that engage. So hand-to-hand combat starts or is acted once 2 figures come together. So in this situation we're going to work out the attack between the 2 units themselves. We've got 4 men. I'm going to say that the skills and drills is 4 for all of the units there, just for simplicity's sake. Right, so dead straightforward combat here. So I'm going to have 4 men attacking 4 others. The Americans, I'm going to say, have the initiative and therefore were the attackers. I'm going to say we've had they've moved and fixed bayonets. So let's have a look at the table and see what the outcome would be. If you've got a set of rules in front of you, you can work down yourself, but I'll just go through it really quite quickly. Difference between the two men, between them, as we're looking at on individual men fighting. I'm going to say that's just the same, so there's no variance there. Defenders lightly injured, well no, that's not the case. Attacking with close combat weapons, so we fix bayonets, so we have that, so it's +2. Each additional AP allocated, so they've got 4 originally. We've moved and fixed bayonets, that's 2, so that leaves 2, so we'll add 2 into that factor, so therefore it's +4. Further down, we're not attacking from behind or a prone figure, so it's +4 in total. Are there any reductions? So, attacker ran into combat, yes they did, so down to 3. Attacker lightly injured, no. Defender has close contact weapons, so again, whether they're with bayonets or not, I'm going to say they saw them coming, and so we could reduce that once again in terms of their units. That's -1, so we're down to 2. Then we could say it's the attacker with an assault rifle from the front. Yes, we are attacking from the front here, so therefore it's neutralised that benefit. And attacker prone, that would be if, for example, they were crawling and attacking that way, or attacking machine gun, or attacking serious injury. They're not, so it's therefore neutralised between them, and so we just roll in each case to see what the results are on this table. So we've got 4 actions. I'm going to say number 1 is at the top of the screen, 4 at the bottom. This is our table. Let's see what the numbers are. First of all, 19, and 19 means the defender is killed. Second is 50. Now I think this has just been missed on the table. I think if we go from 14 through to 16, then the defender is wounded. Third one, number 3, and 3 from there means that the attacker's wounded. Finally, 2. This time the attacker is killed. Now, the next stage of that is, this would be at the end of our turn, so we've got to remember that a number of things happen next. Is that we've got a morale test, so we would see that we've had casualties, and as a consequence we would need to take a morale test for both forces. And then also what would happen, assuming that a random event didn't stop the action altogether, we would then see who has the initiative in terms of who wants to either attack, perhaps withdraw, fire, etc. But that's the sequence, a relatively straightforward sequence about how the hand-to-hand fighting takes place. Right, I'm going to finish with 3 areas in just brief coverage. The first is for vehicles, the second is the role of the medic, and the third is artillery. Now let's consider the role of the medic in the game. Very important indeed. I really like this particular rule, this detail on page 50, and it highlights the significance of the role not only of the medic but the commitment of troops to get the wounded and killed back to base, get treated where possible. So it's a good ethos of the game and doesn't trivialise potential casualties, etc. So really like the way that this works really simply. Is the medic being connected base to base to a figure in order to improve stress and actions, and then we roll a d20 once in a turn when that connection is made, and potentially of 15 or higher, the particular individual can get back to full fitness. So really like this this focus and the role of the medic in the game. And artillery, both direct and indirect, really couldn't be simpler. We've got looking to hit with a 15 or more. We've got some modifiers there in terms of target being in the clear or at a particular distance. If we fail to get to 15, then we have a variable. So we use the arrow dice to see the direction about how far it gets, and then we roll a d20 and half it and see that is the distance, and then we'll have a look about how many figures are affected by that explosion. And to have a look about the impact of artillery, we then go back to the infantry injury chart, and so we can have a look here. If we are looking, for example, a medium mortar, so it's what I've been looking at, we've then got a 6-inch diameter, so look at the figures that are impacted within that distance, and again we roll a d20 for each individual figure and see what impact that's made, whether it's a question of suppression, wounded or killed. Now, I've gone through quite a lot of detail in terms of how firing takes place with a helicopter, so I'm not going to repeat it here because the principle is exactly the same. In terms of crews of vehicles, they have the skills and drills. So the vehicle itself, tank or armoured fighting vehicle, we then have the 6-inch move. So if you can see on the table here, much like we have for helicopters and for planes, we have a number of movements. So I've got an M113 which has 3 movements, and I've also got a Sheridan, and the reason I picked that out is because we've got a movement of 3 over land but also 1 over water. So there are certain tanks which have that capability, and this is a good example. Then we take the number of crew, so we've got 4 crew in it. That's what the armour is, so I'll look at that in a moment in terms of if it gets hit by a rocket, etc., or indeed tanks firing at each other. And then we look at our primary weapon, so take a note that it's category 1, so it'll be a heavy gun, and then we've got a second and third option in terms of our heavy machine gun and light machine gun. And again, whenever we're going through the process, we've got our skills and drills to limit the number of actions that we've got, and importantly, again for both the Sheridan and the M113, it's the same process when we're firing. So we've got a spot, hit, and then the casualties. As far as our vehicles are concerned, there are 2 real options in terms of what they're firing. For a tank, it's our main gun or our machine guns at infantry. So therefore we use the infantry injury chart once a hit is made. Now I would highlight, just going in there looking at the light, medium and heavy machine guns, there's also the 3 or 4 inch spread, so it's those figures within that area who are affected by the firing of the machine gun, and again whether it's suppressed, wounded or killed. The Sheridan, however, has a Cat 1, category 1 main gun, and that means when it's firing at vehicles as an alternative, we use this table. So we're looking at the way it potentially hits other targets, and if so, whether it then goes onto the light, medium or serious damage table, or indeed whether it causes a straight destruction of its target. And here we go in terms of the results. So we then roll again on the severity of the damage, and we can see on the table about how that works, whether it's light, medium or serious, and that will be the consequence. So that's how our vehicles work, be it against infantry or against other vehicles. And with regards to anti-tank, in terms of rockets, etc., it couldn't be any simpler. So we've got categories 3 and 4 working exactly the same way as a tank would be firing with its main gun into the vehicle under categories 1 and 2. Again, if we have a hit with categories 3 and 4, we then go straight to our results table exactly the same way to work out how or what the consequences have been of that particular hit.
Hi, my name's Greg, and thanks for watching the video with regards to BOHICA. So, just a quick review now what my thoughts were of the rules and indeed of the rule set itself. So this is the rules, and to start off with, I would say it's a gorgeous book. Really like it. It's got a lot of illustrations in here, so I'll be more than happy to pay just for the game itself, for the rule set. So, in terms of playing the game and the detail with it, I think it really works well. I think it's a really nice set out that it starts with morale, so that's the first thing we look at. And then one of the things that's really unusual is the fact that we look at the random events before we then have action. So one of the things for me, particularly as a solo player, is that I need some uncertainty within a game for it to be particularly enjoyable. And the random events element of that really helps. Also, one of the things that Paul's done in the rules is not to say this is exactly how you have to play it, and it's a very stiff way of playing, but actually the reality is it gives you the option of actually setting your own random event based on the scenarios that you play. So as a game itself, I think it really works. As you go through the play, it focuses on the platoon, but in actual fact it can take it right down to the individual in terms of skills and drills. I think one of the things you're going to have to get used to is the D20 as opposed to the D6, but I think there's enough variety and nuance to it to think that that's not too much of a distraction. Beyond that, I think as you look and work through the game, one of the areas which I thought would be quite challenging would be aircraft, but in actual fact, as we work through the helicopter example, it actually worked really well. It's actually really simple, as is the case for vehicles, for tanks, etc. Artillery also. It's not overcomplicated, and I think by trying to do that, it allows the game to flow and to play it quickly. I think in terms of hand-to-hand, I think that's relatively simple. It's in line, therefore, with all of the other ways that the game has gone. And I think there's also enough variety for yourself to add your own elements to it if you wish. There is a different way of playing in terms of whether you want to play on individuals, sections, full platoons. There's all the options there for you to be able to do so. The ways in which I think, in a comparison to the other games that I play, so in terms of Vietnam, I play FNG, and I think the random events is a similar way that they play the game in terms of potential enemy forces. So I think if you play that other games, if you play things like FNG, I think you'll see where that comparison lies. I think it's really well. I love little elements of this in terms of things like the medic and the way that plays, but importantly, actually in terms of strategy, the way that you're looking to try and save your troops, save your body in terms of how you play the game that way. And I like that. I like the fact that we're looking to try and actually think about the figures themselves as individuals as opposed to statistics or the amount of people who can fire. I like the way that works. In terms of other areas, such as army lists, it sets up the games with some examples at the end with scenarios. Might well be that army lists come out later on. However, I'm not awfully a fan of army lists. I think if you're interested in the period, what you'll want to do is to try and set out your own game, your own scenario, and actually through research you'll be able to know what kind of forces you're trying to set. Remembering, of course, that it's at a platoon level, and therefore actually in reality it's probably only 20 to 30 aside, whichever way you look at it. So, in conclusion, I think it's a really good game. I think it's easy to play. I think it's well thought out. It's well set out in the rules themselves. It goes through with some simple steps. It's easy to understand. There's a lot more to it than I've presented in the how-to way of playing, all the way from individual ways of working with grenades or booby traps, all the way up to the use of napalm. There's all sorts there. There's lots for you to gain and to understand and get to know. I think it's a really
terrific rule set, and I'm going to have lots of games and lots of enjoyment with the rules. So thanks to Paul. Thanks for watching the video, and if anybody is yet to subscribe, then right at the end, click on subscribe and watch further pieces of video on BOHICA. Thanks very much.